Today, I'm going to have another look at one of the presuppositions of NLP, the one that says the mind and the body affect each other. This is one of the reasons why I got interested in NLP in the first place. I've always been interested in how the body works as well as how the mind works. At one stage in my life, I was intending to go to medical school and train as a doctor. I decided against that. I think if I'd done it, I probably would have ended up in psychiatric medicine. So the fact that I did my degree in psychology and came to NLP and worked with mindset and so on isn't really a surprise against that backdrop. So I've always been interested in both and was always curious as a youngster about the power of the mind over the body and whether it was possible to think yourself well. I used to suffer badly with asthma as a teenager, and I was always encouraged by my parents to take a positive approach to that and to imagine that I would be okay rather than always imagining that I was going to be unwell. So when I came to NLP and discovered this presupposition that the mind and the body affect each other, in the beginning, it was mostly about thinking, well, how does the mind affect the body? And thinking about taking a positive approach to matters of health, taking responsibility for matters of health and so on. And also using the power of the mind to marshal my energy and so on, and being able to get into the right frame of mind and the right physical state to do whatever task presented itself to me in the course of a working day. But then you start to think the other way around. So how does the body affect the mind? And we've probably all had experiences of if you've got a cold or even a bit of flu, then it can tend to drag down your mood so that mentally you don't feel as great because physically you're not feeling so great. And then there's also the effect of nutrition. So, if you've had a really heavy meal the night before, then the next morning you might feel a bit sluggish, a bit less inclined to approach your work with the usual kind of enthusiasm. So we can see that the two things definitely affect each other. But we're still, if we do that, thinking of them as two separate things, when in fact I think it's more useful to think that the mind and the body are inextricably linked. They're just parts of the same system. So whatever's going on in our minds is also going on in our bodies. And, if you stop and think about that for a moment, if you've been sitting at your desk for a long time, then you may find that your thinking sort of grinds to a halt. Possibly because you've been sitting still for a long while. But if you were to look up from your computer and, have a bit of a stretch and move those muscles around a little bit, what you'd discover is that you get renewed energy, you get a different perspective. You're able to go back to your work and it's moved on. You haven't got stuck, not stuck anymore. So the mind and the body are always working together. Now, when it comes to matters of health, a lot of people resist this idea because it's very easy to think, well, if I'm unwell for some reason, it's just a matter of bad luck or it's something in the environment I've been exposed to. The person sitting next to me has been sneezing for a week, so I've caught their cold. It's not my fault. If you approach health with the notion that the mind and body are one, then that kind of indicates that there are things that we're doing in our minds that make a difference to the state of health of our bodies. Now, I'm not saying that if you develop an illness that it's all to do with what you're doing in your head. And I'm certainly not saying it's all in the mind, because clearly it's in the body as well. But what I think I am saying is that there is likely to be a psychological and or an emotional component to most of our physical difficulties. So if we have a cold, then did we catch the cold because actually we're feeling a bit low anyway? And on some level, some part of us is sort of going, I could do with a couple of days at home relaxing. Maybe I've been working too hard and the body's going, stop, take some time out. Oh, developing a cold would give me an excuse to do that. That's an interesting way of looking at it, isn't it? So if you approach your own health with that in mind and thinking, well, there's something going on for my body that's also affected by what's happening in my head, then maybe you can get some kind of control. Maybe you can develop a bit more choice. And maybe you can help yourself to recover more quickly or to have fewer incidences of a chronic condition. I know that after I learnt NLP, I got really interested in this whole thing about asthma. Because in my late 20s, I was still regularly needing medication for it. And so I started to think, well, I'm learning all these techniques about how we deal with habits in our behaviour. What if I treated an asthma attack as just another habit? It's just another bit of behaviour. Okay, it's not something I have any conscious choice over. It's something that's coming, from a physical cause. But what if I applied some of the same NLP techniques? And what I found was that by treating it in that manner and having that approach to it, I was actually able to reduce quite significantly the number of times in a month I actually suffered from an asthma attack. In fact, it pretty much disappeared. Now, a lot of people find that hard to believe, and it's okay if you're in that category, because that's outside of most people's experience. But what I think is worth doing is just to stop and take stock every now and again and say to yourself, if the health of my body is also affected by what's going on in my mind, are there some things that I can stop thinking, or things that I can start thinking, or things that I can change a little bit in the way that I'm thinking that might support me in having a better physical health? And also, if you play a sport, there'll be times when you perform really well and times when you perform less well. You're probably familiar with the idea that a lot of that's to do with what's going on up here. Again, if you come back to that and say, are there things that I'm thinking that are getting in the way of me doing my best? Are there things that I could stop thinking, or things that I could start thinking that might make a difference? Because ultimately, if we accept this idea that the mind and body are indeed parts of the same system, that actually opens up a whole different set of possibilities. It means that your physical experience is not random, that you do actually have some control, some choice over how it goes. Food for thought, eh?